Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, originally, the intent of this series was to create interesting concert programs around lesser-known works. But some composers have, especially symphonies, by the way, and some composers have a mixture of, very well-known and virtually unknown works or works that are vastly less popular or less frequently performed. One of those was Sibelius. And so I did a bunch of Sibelius programs, featuring his less popular symphonies, numbers 3, 4, 6, things like that. And also sticking 7 in with 6 because it made sense. Well, a bunch of you wrote to me and said, do the rest of the Sibelius cycle. You're right, because as with Dvorak, 7, 8, 9 are hugely popular, 1 through 6 are not. So you do the whole cycle, and I'm going to wrap up the Sibelius cycle that way by popular demand. And so we're re-beginning with Symphony No. 1. And I think I have a really interesting program for Symphony No. 1, and this is one of the programs that's organized around timbre, around certain recurring sounds. Not that the works have a lot in common. Actually, 2 of them do, but one of them doesn't. And it's a particular sound that creates that sense of familiarity, of things belonging naturally together. And the timbre in question at this particular program is the sound of the clarinet. A beautiful, unmistakably distinctive sound. Now, the Sibelius First Symphony, as some of you may know, begins with a long clarinet solo over a timpani roll. So I figured let's take that as our starting point and start the program with a real novelty. Michael Tippett's Symphony in B-flat. Now, Michael Tippett wrote, as we know, 4 numbered symphonies, but he wrote a lot of music before his canonic Opus 1, which I believe was the Concerto for Double String Orchestra or something like that. And he disowned most of that music or let it fall into neglect. And he wrote a symphony, a fairly substantial symphony, and a lovely symphony in B-flat in 1934. It is heavily indebted to Sibelius. It sounds nothing like the later Tippett. There's none of that contrapuntal interest, but there are some hints. There's interesting solo writing for harp, for example, in a sort of fantastical way. And there are high-lying passages for strings and things that kind of remind us of the Tippett to come. But more often than not, it does remind us a little bit of Sibelius. And it begins with a big clarinet solo, just like the Sibelius First Symphony. Now, it's not a terribly long piece. It's about half an hour or a little bit less, maybe. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know this really early example of Tippett's art. He was, even by then, a very mature composer. It's by no means a dismissible work. It's not a masterpiece, no, but it deserves to be heard. It would make a lovely concert opener and a great novelty, I think. Really very interesting entree into his youthful style. So I begin the concert with Tippett's First Symphony. And then we're going to continue our theme of clarinet with a concerto, the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. Possibly the greatest clarinet concerto ever written. Certainly one of them, along with Nielsen and a couple other people. And what a brilliant and wonderful work it is. And it's perfect after, I think, the Tippett, with its lyric grace and wonderful fund of melody and totally different style, but the same sound. And that's the key, because then we go off on to intermission. And after we're done intermissing, we come back for Sibelius's First Symphony, which is such a summary of everything we've heard before, because it begins with that wonderful long clarinet solo. Now, the Sibelius First is a very interesting piece, actually. I was very surprised when I first heard it, because like most people, I was raised on Sibelius's Second. That was, the Sibelius Symphony to hear. If you're only hearing one, it's the one everybody played. I like the first much better, personally. I really do. I think it's emotionally more interesting, because it begins in the minor and it ends in the minor. Very unusually. It's also one of the very few works that has a big, loud peroration that dies away quietly just in the last couple bars. So you get the bang of a big ending with the emotional demeanor of a quiet, more ominous ending. One of the only other works that ever did that was Dvorak's New World Symphony. I mean, that's a piece that does it too. But it's a fascinating piece, a beautiful piece. It's more in the style of his tone poems leading up to that point, like on Saga and the Lemminkainen legends, and pieces that have like harp and it's got percussion. It's got a little bit more late romantic color. It's very Tchaikovskyan, as Sibelius himself admitted, with big, passionate, gusty tunes. It's just tremendous fun. It really is. And after the intermission and after hearing these two other pieces, one of which has a great deal to do with Sibelius, not just in the clarinet solo, that is the Tippett, the other, of course, the clarinet concerto, and then the clarinet-led Sibelius first, creates, I think, a wonderfully unified program that will put a new spin on an old warhorse. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me as we wrap up this discussion of the Sibelius symphonies. Take care.